The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Jefferson Academy, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Maya Rodriguez had always found comfort in the early hours before classes began, when the prestigious boarding school in upstate New York felt less like a battlefield and more like the sanctuary it was supposed to be. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Her worn leather messenger bag hung heavy across her shoulder. As she made her way through the main corridor, past oil paintings of former headmasters and trophy cases filled with decades of achievements, Maya kept her head down, dark curls falling like a curtain around her face, hoping to remain invisible. Until she reached her first period, chemistry class, but invisibility was a luxury she couldn't afford at Jefferson Academy. Not when your last name was Rodriguez and your father cleaned the very floors you walked on. The sound of expensive sneakers squeaking against marble made her stomach clench. She recognized that particular rhythm, confident, entitled, approaching. Fast. Maya quickened her pace, but the corridor stretched endlessly ahead, and her pursuers had longer legs and years of lacrosse training. Well. The voice belonged to Brandon Whitmore, son of a Supreme Court justice and Jefferson Academy's golden boy. His perfectly styled blonde hair caught the morning light as he stepped into her path, flanked by his usual crew. Look! What crawled out of the janitor's closet? To his left stood Trevor Ashford, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune, his green eyes cold as winter ice. On Brandon's right, Marcus Sterling flexed his fingers, the starting quarterback whose father owned half the real estate in Manhattan. Three boys who'd never known want, never felt hunger, never understood what it meant to work for every single thing you had. Maya's grip tightened on her bag strap. Inside, carefully protected by layers of bubble wrap, sat a scholarship letter. From MAT, full ride. 4 years of freedom from this place, from these people. But that was still months away, and she had to survive until then. I heard something interesting yesterday, Brandon continued, his voice carrying that particular tone of manufactured concern that wealthy boys used when they were about to destroy someone. My dad was talking to the headmaster about financial aid recipients. Apparently, there's been some irregularities. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her expression neutral. Her father had taught her that much: never let them see you sweat. Luz Rodriguez had worked double shifts for 3 years to supplement her scholarship, taking on weekend catering jobs and summer maintenance contracts. Every penny earned honestly, every sacrifice made with love. Nothing to say? Trevor stepped closer, his designer cologne failing to mask the cruelty in his smile. That's unusual. You're usually so vocal in class. Always raising your hand, always trying to prove you belong here. The morning light shifted, and Maya caught sight of her reflection in the window beside her. Small, slight, wearing clothes from thrift stores while surrounded by boys in $1,000 uniforms. But her mother's words echoed in her mind, spoken years ago in their cramped apartment in Queens. Mia, they can take everything from you except what you know and who you choose to be. Marcus cracked his knuckles, a sound that echoed off the marble walls. My dad's on the board of trustees. He says they're looking into every scholarship student's background, making sure the money's going to deserving families. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Maya had watched this play out before with other scholarship students, whispered accusations, investigations that found nothing but left reputations in ruins, families forced to withdraw from the school in shame. It was a tried and tested method of maintaining Jefferson Academy's particular brand of exclusivity. The thing is, Brandon said, circling her like a predator, my father has connections everywhere. The IRS, Immigration Services, the Department of Education. One phone call, and your dad's working papers get a very thorough review. Another call, And that scholarship of yours disappears faster than you can say deportation. Maya's jaw clenched. Her father had been a citizen longer than Brandon had been alive, but she knew the truth didn't matter when you were dealing with people who had the power to rewrite reality to suit their needs. We're not unreasonable, Trevor added, his voice dripping with false kindness. We just want what's fair. Your dad's been saving up for something, hasn't he? That envelope he keeps in his work locker? The one with all those 20s? The blood drained from Maya's face. They'd been watching, planning. These boys who had everything were so threatened by her presence that they'd spent time tracking her family's every move. Here's what's going to happen, Brandon said, stepping so close she could smell the expensive coffee on his breath. You're going to tell Daddy Dearest to share his little nest egg. Consider it a donation to the school's athletic program. In exchange, we make sure nobody asks too many questions about how a janitor's daughter ended up at Jefferson Academy. Maya's hand drifted to the small jade pendant at her throat, a gift from her grandmother, carved with symbols of protection and strength. Abuela Carmen had pressed it into her palm the day she left for Jefferson, whispering ancient words about the power that lived in a woman's hands, the strength that came from knowing exactly who you were. And if we refuse? Maya's voice was steady, controlled, giving nothing away. Marcus stepped forward, his shadow falling across her face. Then you'll find out what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. The corridor was empty except for them, the morning stillness broken only by the distant hum of the heating system and the soft tick of the grandfather clock near the headmaster's office. Maya calculated distances, escape routes, the exact positioning of each boy. Years of judo training had taught her to read a room, to understand leverage and momentum, to turn size and strength into disadvantages. But this wasn't a dojo. This was Jefferson Academy, where boys like Brandon, Trevor, and Marcus wrote the rules and bought the referees. Where a scholarship girl from Queens had no allies, no protection, no recourse except the skills her father had insisted she learn. Time's up, Brandon said, his patience wearing thin. What's it going to be, Rodriguez? The easy way or the hard way? Maya looked at each of them in turn, these boys who thought power meant taking what didn't belong to them, who believed their birthright included the right to destroy anyone who dared to dream above their station. Then she lifted her chin, met Brandon's gaze directly, and spoke words that would echo through Jefferson Academy's halls for years to come. There's a third way, she said quietly. But you're not going to like it. The morning sun climbed higher, casting harsh shadows across the marble floor. In the distance, a door slammed, and footsteps echoed from another corridor. The school was waking up, but in this pocket of privileged cruelty, 3 boys learned that sometimes the mouse has teeth. Brandon's hand shot out, fingers closing around Maya's wrist with bruising force. You don't get to choose scholarship. Girl, you don't get to. The words died in his throat as Maya's eyes went cold, dark as winter ocean. Her grandmother's training whispered through her muscles. Her father's sacrifices burned in her chest, and her mother's strength flowed through her bones like liquid fire. The morning light caught the jade pendant at her throat, and for just a moment, it seemed to glow with an inner light. Maya Rodriguez, daughter of a janitor, scholarship student, dreamer of impossible dreams, planted her feet and prepared to show Jefferson Academy what happened when you grabbed a dragon by the tail. Brandon's grip on Maya's wrist tightened, his manicured nails digging into her skin. The corridor suddenly felt smaller, the morning light harsher, as if the very walls of Jefferson Academy were closing in to witness what came next. You think you're clever? Brandon's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow felt more dangerous than shouting. You think being the headmaster's pet project gives you some kind of protection? Maya's pulse hammered where his fingers pressed against her veins, but her breathing remained controlled. Sensei Watanabe had drilled this into her during countless hours at the community dojo in Queen's. Fear was just another opponent to defeat. And panic was the enemy of precision. Trevor circled behind her, cutting off her retreat toward the main entrance. My family's donated millions to this school. The science wing? That's the Ashford building. The new gymnasium? Ashford Center for Athletic Excellence. His voice carried the casual arrogance of someone who'd never been denied anything. You're nothing but a tax write-off with a pulse. Marcus positioned himself near the large windows that overlooked the academy's pristine courtyard. 3 stories down, early morning joggers traced paths through manicured gardens, completely unaware of the drama unfolding above them. Here's how this works, Rodriguez. You disappear. Transfer to some public school where you belong. In exchange, we don't make some very unfortunate discoveries about your father's immigration status. Maya's free hand moved instinctively to her pendant, the jade warm against her palm. Abuela Carmen's voice echoed across the years. The strong prey on the weak only when the weak allow it, Mia. But remember, a reed bends in the storm while the mighty oak snaps. My father's been a citizen for 20 years, Maya said, her voice steady despite the fire building in her chest. He served 2 tours in Afghanistan before you were even born. Brandon's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Details. Paperwork can disappear. Witnesses can be found. My father's prosecuted war heroes before. Turns out they're not so heroic when they're sitting in federal prison. The threat hung in the air like a physical weight. Maya had grown up hearing stories of families torn apart by the system, of good people destroyed by those with power and no conscience. But she'd also grown up watching her parents fight for everything they had, never backing down, never surrendering. Their dignity. You know what I think? Trevor stepped closer, his breath hot against her ear. I think you're scared. I think you've been scared since the day you walked through these doors, pretending to be something you're not. Maya's muscles coiled like springs. The jade pendant seemed to pulse with warmth, and she could almost hear her grandmother's laughter. Rich and knowing. Abuela Carmen had been a revolutionary in her youth, fighting alongside Che Guevara before fleeing to America. She'd faced down soldiers and dictators, corrupt officials and street thugs. A spoiled rich boy was nothing. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Scared? Maya's voice carried a new edge, something cold and sharp that made Brandon's grip waver for just a moment. You think I'm scared of you? Marcus moved closer to the window, his bulk blocking the morning light. You should be. Do you know what happens to scholarship students who don't play nice? They have accidents. They get hurt. Sometimes they just disappear. The words crystallized something in Maya's mind. This wasn't just about money or status, it was about power. About these boys' desperate need to prove they owned everything and everyone around them. They weren't just threatening her. They were threatening her family, her future, her very existence. Let me tell you a story, Maya said, her voice dropping to match Brandon's earlier whisper. There was once a girl who thought she could make herself smaller, quieter, invisible. She thought if she didn't cause trouble, trouble wouldn't find her. Brandon's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? That girl was wrong, Maya continued, her free hand slowly moving to adjust her bag strap. Trouble found her anyway. And when it did, she remembered something her grandmother taught her about wolves and sheep. Trevor frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Maya's lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Wolves don't hunt other wolves. They hunt sheep. But sometimes they mistake a dragon for a sheep. The moment stretched taut between them, morning light slanting through the windows, the distant sound of students beginning to fill the lower corridors. Brandon's grip on her wrist was strong, but Maya had spent years learning to use strength against itself. Enough games, Marcus snarled, moving away from the window. We're done talking. That's when Maya saw it, the security camera in the corner, its red light blinking steadily. And walking down the corridor behind Marcus, trying to stay unnoticed, was Katie Chun, a sophomore from Maya's chemistry class. Katie's phone was out, angled carefully to capture the confrontation. Maya's mind raced. Katie was another scholarship student, someone who understood what it meant to be different in a place that worshipped conformity. Their eyes met for just a moment, and Maya saw something there: determination, solidarity, the quiet courage of someone who decided to stand witness. "You're right," Maya said suddenly, her voice carrying clearly down the corridor. "We are done talking." Brandon's confusion lasted exactly 1 second, the time it took for Maya to pivot, drop her center of gravity, and use his own grip against him. Her grandmother's training exploded through her muscles as she executed a perfect hip throw, Brandon's weight becoming his weakness as physics took over. But Maya wasn't done. The months of humiliation, the daily microaggressions, the constant threat to her family's safety, it all crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. As Brandon flew through the air, Maya's momentum carried her forward, her body becoming a weapon forged from years of discipline and powered by righteous fury. The large window behind Marcus exploded in a shower of safety glass as Brandon's body crashed through it, his cry of shock and terror echoing across the courtyard below. But Maya's technique was flawless. Brandon landed in the perfectly manicured hedge 3 stories down. Bruised and humiliated but alive, Trevor rushed forward. But Maya was already moving, her body flowing like water on his clumsy grab. Another throw, another perfect execution. And suddenly there were 2 bodies crashing through the shattered window frame, their expensive uniforms no protection against gravity and momentum. Marcus, the biggest of them all, froze in shock. The quarterback who'd terrorized smaller students for years found himself face to face with something he'd never encountered: someone who fought back, someone who wouldn't be intimidated, someone who turned his size into a disadvantage. "Your turn," Maya said quietly, her stance perfect, her breathing controlled. The jade pendant caught the morning light, and for a moment, she looked like her grandmother must have in the mountains of Cuba, facing down soldiers with nothing but courage and skill. Marcus looked at the gaping window, at his friends groaning in the hedges below, at the girl who'd just rewritten the rules of Jefferson Academy. Then he did something he'd never done before in his life. He ran. The silence that followed Marcus's retreat was deafening. Broken glass crunched under Maya's feet as she stood in the devastated corridor, her chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. The morning sun streamed through the gaping window frame, carrying with it the distant sounds of chaos from the courtyard below: shouts, running footsteps, the sharp blast of a whistle. Katie Chun stepped forward, her phone still recording, her face pale but determined. "Maya, are you hurt?" Her voice was barely a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile moment. Maya looked down at her hands, steady despite everything. A thin line of blood traced her wrist where Brandon's nails had dug in, but otherwise she was unharmed. "I'm fine." The words came out stronger than she felt. From the courtyard, Brandon's voice carried up through the broken window, high-pitched and panicked. "My arm! Something's wrong with my arm." Trevor's groans mixed with the sound of groundskeepers rushing to help, their voices urgent and confused. Katie lowered her phone, her expression shifting from shock to something like awe. "I can't believe you actually did it. I mean, I saw it happen, but I still can't believe it." Maya moved away from the window, her mind already racing ahead to the consequences. In approximately 3 minutes, security would arrive. In 5, the headmaster would be called. In 10, the police would be involved. The careful life she'd built at Jefferson Academy, the scholarship that represented her family's dreams, all of it was about to come crashing down around her. "We need to get you out of here," Katie said, reading her thoughts. "Before they..." "No." Maya's voice was firm. "Running makes me look guilty. I defended myself, nothing more." The sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the main stairwell. Head of Security Robert Martinez appeared first, his hand resting on his radio, his weathered face grim. Behind him came Vice Principal Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, her usually perfect hair disheveled, her eyes wide with disbelief as she took in the scene. "Miss Rodriguez." Martinez's voice was carefully neutral, but Maya caught the flicker of something in his eyes, not anger, but what might have been respect. "Step away from the window, please." Maya complied, her movements slow and deliberate. She'd learned long ago that sudden motions around authority figures could be misinterpreted, especially when you looked like her and came from where she came from. Dr. Hawthorne stared at the shattered window, then at the blood on Maya's wrist, then at Katie's phone. "Someone wants to explain what happened here." "3 students attempted to assault Miss Rodriguez," Katie said before Maya could speak. "I have the entire incident recorded. They threatened her family, grabbed her, and tried to intimidate her into giving them money." Maya shot Katie a grateful look. Having a witness, a credible witness from another scholarship family, might be the difference between justice and a railroad job. Martinez spoke into his radio, his voice crackling through the static. "I need medical treatment at the North Courtyard. 3 students, possible injuries from a fall. And get me campus security footage from Corridor C7. Timestamp 0800 to 0830. Dr. Hawthorne's phone buzzed insistently. She glanced at the screen, and her face went pale. "The headmaster wants to see everyone in his office, now." The walk to Headmaster Davidson's office felt like a death march. Maya's sneakers squeaked against the polished floors, each step echoing off the portraits of distinguished alumni who seemed to watch her with disapproving eyes. Katie walked beside her, clutching her phone like a lifeline, while Dr. Hawthorne and Martinez flanked them like an honor guard. The headmaster's office was a temple to old money and older traditions. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, and a massive desk that had probably witnessed a century of disciplinary proceedings. Headmaster Davidson sat behind it, his silver hair perfectly styled, his blue suit immaculate despite the early hour, but it was the other occupants of the room that made Maya's blood run cold. Supreme Court Justice William Whitmore sat in a leather chair, his face thunderous with rage. Beside him, pharmaceutical CEO Margaret Ashford spoke quietly into her phone, her voice sharp with legal threats. And near the window, real estate mogul David Sterling paced like a caged animal, his expensive watch catching the light as he gestured angrily. "Sit down, Miss Rodriguez." Davidson's voice was ice-cold professionalism. "You too, Miss Chun." Maya took the chair across from the headmaster, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. Beside her, Katie clutched her phone tighter, her knuckles white with tension. Justice Whitmore leaned forward, his eyes blazing. "Do you have any idea what you've done? My son has a dislocated shoulder and possible concussion. The Ashford boy has a broken wrist. That's aggravated assault, young lady. In some states, that's a felony." "With respect, sir," Maya said quietly, "your son assaulted me first. I was defending myself." Margaret Ashford ended her call and turned to face them. "Self-defense? You threw 3 boys through a window. That's not self-defense, that's attempted murder." Katie's voice was steady despite her obvious fear. "I have video evidence that shows Brandon Whitmore grabbing Maya's wrist and threatening her family. Trevor Ashford made physical contact without permission. Marcus Sterling blocked her escape route and made verbal threats. David Sterling stopped pacing. You're going to take the word of another scholarship student over 3 upstanding young men?" "I'm going to take the word of video evidence," Katie replied, holding up her phone. "Everything's recorded. The threats, the assault, the self-defense. All of it." Headmaster Davidson held out his hand. "Let me see that phone." Maya felt her heart sink. Without the video, it would be her word against 3 wealthy families with unlimited resources and political connections. But Katie surprised her. I'm sorry, sir, but I've already uploaded the footage to a secure cloud server. My mother's a paralegal. She taught me about preserving evidence. The room fell silent. Maya could hear the distant sound of sirens approaching. Probably the ambulance for Brandon and Trevor. Outside, students were gathering in the courtyard, their voices a low buzz of excitement and speculation. Martinez cleared his throat. Sir, I've reviewed the security footage from the hallway. Miss Rodriguez's account is accurate. The 3 male students initiated physical contact and made verbal threats. Her response, while dramatic, appears to be justified self-defense. Justice Whitmore's face turned red. This is outrageous. These girls are conspiring against our sons. Dad, the voice came from the doorway, weak but clear. Brandon Whitmore stood there, his left arm in a sling, his designer uniform torn and stained with grass. Behind him, Trevor nursed his cast-covered wrist, his face pale with pain. Brandon, Justice Whitmore stood up. Thank God you're all right. Tell them what really happened. Brandon looked at Maya, then at his father, then at the floor. For a long moment, he said nothing. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely audible. She's telling the truth, Dad. We cornered her. We threatened her family. I grabbed her first. The admission fell like a bomb in the silent room. Margaret Ashford's phone slipped from her fingers. David Sterling stopped pacing. Headmaster Davidson leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Brandon, what are you saying? Justice Whitmore's voice was strangled. I'm saying we were wrong. Brandon's eyes met Maya's, and she saw something there she'd never seen. Before shame, maybe even respect. We've been wrong about a lot of things, Trevor nodded reluctantly. She could have really hurt us. The way she moved, the control she had. She could have done a lot worse than put us in some hedges. Maya felt the tide turning, but she knew better than to celebrate too early. These families had too much power, too many connections to simply accept defeat. But then Katie spoke up, her voice cutting through the tension. There's something else you should know. This wasn't an isolated incident. I have recordings of similar confrontations going back months. This is a pattern of behavior. The room erupted in chaos as the true scope of the bullying came to light. But Maya remained calm, centered, ready for whatever came next. The chaos in Headmaster Davidson's office reached a crescendo as Katie's words sank in. Margaret Ashford's perfectly composed mask cracked, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. What recordings? What pattern? Katie's fingers moved swiftly across her phone screen. 3 weeks ago, these same boys cornered Jessica Martinez in the library stacks. 2 months before that, they surrounded David Kim near the athletic building after hours. Last semester, they made Lisa Washington transfer schools after spreading rumors about her mother's cleaning business. Each name hit the room like a physical blow. Maya watched the parents' faces transform, Justice Whitmore's righteous anger faltering, David Sterling's bluster deflating, Margaret Ashford's legal threats evaporating into stunned silence. That's impossible, Dr. Hawthorne whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. We would have known. There would have been reports. There were reports, Martinez said quietly, consulting his tablet. I'm looking at them now. Each incident was filed under resolved through mediation, or dismissed due to insufficient evidence. But Miss Chen's footage shows a different story. Katie connected her phone to the office's smart display, and suddenly the wall came alive. With video. The first clip showed Brandon, Trevor, and Marcus surrounding a terrified-looking Latina girl in the library. Their voices low, but their body language unmistakably threatening. The girl, Jessica Martinez, pressed herself against the bookshelves as Brandon leaned in close, his words inaudible but his intent crystal clear. Turn it off, Justice Whitmore said sharply. But Davidson raised a hand. Let it play. The second video was worse. David Kim, a quiet sophomore from Maya's advanced calculus class, backed against a brick wall while the three boys formed a semicircle around him. Trevor's hand was on David's shoulder, fingers digging in just hard enough to hurt without leaving visible marks. Marcus held up his phone, recording David's humiliation for their private entertainment, but it was the third video that broke the room's stunned silence. Lisa Washington Maya remembered her now, a brilliant girl who'd vanished from Jefferson Academy mid-semester stood in the courtyard, while Brandon showed other students something on his phone. The laughter was cruel, visceral, and Lisa's face crumpled like paper in rain. "Enough," Margaret Ashford said, her voice barely audible. "Stop it, please." Katie paused the video, but the damage was done. The evidence hung in the air like smoke, choking off the parents' protests and excuses. Maya felt a strange mixture of vindication and sorrow. Vindication for herself, sorrow for all the others who'd suffered in silence. "Where did these recordings come from?" Davidson asked, his composure finally cracking. "Security cameras that you have access to," Katie replied. "Motion-activated phones in backpacks. Students who learned to document everything because they knew no one would believe them otherwise." She gestured to her device. "There are 17 more incidents spanning the last 2 years. Should I continue?" The silence stretched until Brandon spoke again, his voice hollow with exhaustion. "We thought it was funny. We thought they deserved it for being here when they didn't belong." "Belong?" Maya's voice cut through the quiet like a blade. "This is a school, not a country club. We earned our places here." Trevor shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his broken wrist cradled against his chest. "You don't understand the pressure we're under, the expectations. Our families, your families have given you everything," Maya interrupted, her composure finally cracking. "Money, connections, opportunities that most people can only dream of. And you used all of that privilege to terrorize people who worked twice as hard for half as much." David Sterling found his voice again, but it was smaller now, defeated. "What? Do you want money? We can arrange financial compensation for the misunderstanding." Maya's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You think this is about money? You still don't get it." Katie stepped forward, her phone still connected to the display. "There's something else you need to see. The reason I started recording in the first place." The new video was different, grainier, obviously taken from a hidden position. It showed a faculty meeting in this very office with Davidson, Dr. Hawthorne, and several other administrators discussing the scholarship problem. Maya's stomach clenched as she heard her own name mentioned, along with phrases like maintaining standards and preserving institutional culture. "This was recorded 3 months ago," Katie said quietly, "right after Maya aced her midterm exams and got mentioned in the local newspaper for her science project. Suddenly, there was a lot of interest in reviewing scholarship criteria." The room erupted again, but this time the energy was different. The parents who'd been so quick to protect their sons now found themselves implicated in something much larger, a systematic effort to push out students who didn't fit Jefferson Academy's exclusive mold. "You recorded faculty meetings?" Davidson's voice was dangerous now, all pretense of civility abandoned. "I recorded conversations happening in supposedly secure locations where you thought no one was watching," Katie corrected. "Just like your sons thought no one was watching when they decided to make our lives hell." Martinez stood up, his radio crackling with static. "Sir, we have local news vans at the main gate. Word's getting out about this morning's incident." Through the office windows, Maya could see students gathering in clusters across the campus, their phones out, their conversations animated. The carefully controlled environment of Jefferson Academy was cracking apart, and everyone could feel it. "This ends now," Davidson said, his authority reasserting itself. "Miss Rodriguez, Miss Chun, you'll both be suspended pending a full investigation. The boys will receive medical treatment and counseling. We'll handle this internally." "No." Maya's voice was quiet but absolute. We won't. Excuse me? Justice Whitmore leaned forward, his political instincts kicking in. Young lady, you're in no position to make demands. Maya reached into her bag and pulled out a thick envelope, her acceptance letter from MIT, the scholarship documentation, her academic transcripts. She placed them on Davidson's desk with deliberate care. I'm not making demands, she said. I'm making a choice. Katie's footage goes public today. Every video, every recording, every piece of evidence we've gathered. Students, parents, media, everyone gets to see what Jefferson Academy really is. Margaret Ashford was already on her phone, speed dialing her legal team. You can't do that. There are privacy laws, confidentiality agreements, that you violated when you conspired to force out scholarship students, Katie interrupted. My mother's already filed preliminary injunctions against any attempt to suppress the evidence. Maya stood up, her decision crystallizing into action. I came here believing Jefferson Academy represented excellence, opportunity, the chance to prove myself in the best environment possible. Instead, I found a system designed to crush anyone who threatened the status quo. She picked up her acceptance letter and held it up for everyone to see. This represents 4 years at one of the best technical institutes in the world. Full scholarship, research opportunities, connections that could change my entire family's future. The room was dead silent, everyone understanding the weight of what she held. But staying here, accepting your version of justice, letting you sweep this under the rug like you did with Jessica and David and Lisa, that would make me complicit in my own destruction. Maya folded the letter carefully and tucked it back into her bag. So here's what's going to happen. She moved toward the door, Katie beside her, their footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. The truth comes out. All of it. And Jefferson Academy finally learns what accountability looks like. As they reached the door, Brandon's voice stopped them. Maya, wait. She turned, seeing something in his face she'd never expected: genuine remorse, maybe even respect. For what it's worth, he said quietly, you earned everything you have here. We never did. Maya nodded once, then walked out into a future she was about to create with her own hands. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Jefferson Academy's campus as Maya walked toward the main gate, her messenger bag slung over her shoulder, and Katie at her side. Behind them, the ancient brick building seemed to watch their departure with disapproval, as if the very architecture resented their rebellion against centuries of tradition. 6 hours had passed since the confrontation. In Davidson's office, 6 hours that had transformed Jefferson Academy from a bastion of elite education into the center of a national conversation about privilege, accountability, and justice. Maya's phone buzzed constantly, interview requests from local news stations, messages of support from students at other schools, even a call from a documentary filmmaker interested in telling their story. But she ignored most of them, focused instead on the small crowd gathered near the Academy's wrought iron gates. Jessica Martinez stood with her parents, her mother's arm wrapped protectively around her daughter's shoulders. David Kim had driven down from his new school in Massachusetts, his quiet presence speaking volumes about the courage it took to return to this place. And there, speaking with a reporter from the Albany Times-Union, was Lisa Washington, the girl who'd vanished mid-semester, now back to reclaim her narrative. Maya, Jessica's voice carried across the courtyard as she broke away from her parents and ran toward them. I can't believe you actually did it. When I saw the video this morning, I thought I was dreaming. Maya hugged her tightly, feeling the weight of shared trauma and newfound solidarity. We should have done it sooner, all of us, together. David approached more cautiously, his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. My parents want to sue the school, he said quietly. They're talking about civil rights violations, emotional distress, lost educational opportunities. Good, Katie said firmly. They deserve everything that's coming to them. Lisa Washington finished her interview and walked over, her expression a mixture of vindication and exhaustion. 3 different law firms have called me today. Apparently, documenting institutional racism is very marketable right now. Maya winced at the cynicism in Lisa's voice, understanding it completely. This isn't about money or publicity. It's about making sure this never happens to anyone else, is it? Lisa's question hung in the air, challenging and complex. Because tomorrow, you'll be the girl who took down Jefferson Academy. You'll have book deals and speaking engagements, and university recruiters lining up to offer you opportunities. But what about the kids who don't know judo? What about the ones who can't fight back? Before Maya could respond, a new voice interrupted them. She's right, you know. They turned to see Marcus Sterling approaching, his varsity jacket replaced by a simple hoodie, his usual swagger completely absent. Behind him, at a careful distance, stood his father, no longer the commanding presence from the morning's meeting, but a man who suddenly looked older, smaller, diminished. Marcus, Maya's voice was neutral, cautious. I've been thinking about what you said this morning, Marcus continued, his words carefully chosen. About power and birthright, and being scared. You were right about all of it. Katie stepped protectively closer to Maya. If this is some kind of attempt to manipulate the narrative, it's not. Marcus held up his hands, a gesture of surrender. My dad's already withdrawn his funding from the school. The Sterling Athletic Center is getting renamed. He's talking about setting up a scholarship fund for students from underserved communities. David Kim's eyebrows rose skeptically. Guilt. Money. Yeah, probably, Marcus admitted, but it's something. And Trevor's family is doing the same thing. The Ashford Science Wing is becoming the Ashford Martinez Collaborative Learning Center, named after Jessica's mom, who's apparently some kind of genius engineer that they never bothered to notice before. Maya felt a familiar wariness creeping. Rich families were experts at buying their way out of consequences, at turning scandals into tax-deductible philanthropy. What about Brandon? Marcus's expression darkened. Brandon's in a different kind of trouble. Turns out his dad's been using his Justice Department connections to suppress investigations into other schools, other families. The FBI is very interested in certain patterns of behavior. The weight of that revelation settled over the group like a heavy blanket. Maya had wanted accountability, but she hadn't anticipated the domino effect that would topple powerful people far beyond Jefferson Academy's walls. There's something else, Marcus said, his voice dropping lower. Something you need to know before it hits the news tomorrow. He pulled out his phone and showed them a document, an official letter from the New York State Department of Education. Maya scanned the first few lines and felt her heart sink. They're shutting down the academy, she whispered. Emergency review found systematic violations of civil rights law, discriminatory practices, and institutional failure to protect students, Marcus read from the letter. Jefferson Academy will cease operations at the end of this academic year. All students will be transferred to other institutions, and the endowment will be redistributed to public education initiatives. Lisa Washington laughed, but there was no joy in the sound. So we win, but we also lose. The school that tormented us is gone, but so is the education we came here for. Maya stared at the letter, feeling the complexity of unintended consequences. She'd wanted justice, not destruction. She'd wanted change, not the complete dismantling of an institution that, for all its flaws, had also produced some genuinely brilliant minds. The students, Katie said suddenly. What happens to the other scholarship kids who are still here? Marcus scrolled through more documents on his phone. Full scholarships to comparable institutions. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, they're all scrambling to recruit Jefferson's displaced students. Apparently, surviving this place is being seen as a mark of exceptional character. Maya felt her phone buzz again and glanced at the screen. This time, it wasn't another reporter. It was Sensei Watanabe from the community dojo in Queens. "Proud of you, Maya," the text read. "Your grandmother would be too. True strength isn't about winning fights, it's about changing the world." As if summoned by the mention of family, Maya spotted a familiar figure walking across the campus toward them. Luis Rodriguez, still in his maintenance uniform, moved with the quiet dignity that had always defined him. His eyes found Maya's across the courtyard, and his smile was small but infinitely proud. "Mia," he said as he reached them, pulling Maya into a fierce hug. "The whole school's been talking about what you did. Some of the faculty are calling you a troublemaker, but the custodial staff, we're calling you a hero." Maya leaned into her father's embrace, feeling the weight of the day finally catching up with her. "I might have made things worse, Dad. The school's closing. All those opportunities, all that history." "Bad history," Luis interrupted gently. "Sometimes things have to break completely before they can be rebuilt the right way." He looked around at the gathered students, these young people who'd found their voices in the aftermath of Maya's courage. "You know what your mother used to say? She said that revolution doesn't happen in boardrooms or courthouses. It happens when ordinary people decide they've had enough and choose to stand up." Maya pulled back to look at her father, seeing the pride and love in his eyes. "What happens now?" Luis smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "Now you go to MIT and become everything you're meant to be. And maybe, along the way, you help build schools where every student can do the same." As the sun set behind Jefferson Academy's towers, Maya Rodriguez stood surrounded by the people whose lives had been changed by a single moment of courage. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new fights worth fighting. Tonight, for the first time in years, she felt truly free. The jade pendant around her neck caught the last rays of sunlight, and Maya could almost hear her grandmother's laughter carrying on the wind, proud, fierce, and utterly unafraid. 6 months later, Maya Rodriguez stood in the gleaming corridors of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, her new student ID badge catching the fluorescent light as she navigated toward her advanced robotics lab. The halls here hummed with a different energy than Jefferson Academy focused. Collaborative, electric with the promise of discovery rather than heavy with the weight of tradition. Her phone chimed with a notification from the Scholarship Foundation that had emerged from Jefferson Academy's ashes. The Rodriguez-Chen Educational Justice Fund, named after Maya and Katie's partnership in exposing the truth, had just awarded its 50th full scholarship to underserved students across the country. Maya smiled, remembering how Katie had insisted on joint naming despite Maya's protests. "Maya Rodriguez?" A voice called from behind her. She turned to see Dr. Amelia Foster, the department head who'd personally recruited her after the Jefferson Academy story broke national news. Perfect timing. "I have someone I'd like you to meet." Dr. Foster led her into a conference room where a young black woman sat reviewing technical schematics, her hijab pinned with small engineering symbols. She looked up as they entered, her eyes bright with intelligence and determination. "Maya, this is Amina Hassan. She's transferring here from Jefferson Academy, one of the last students before they closed permanently. Amina, meet Maya Rodriguez, the student whose actions made your scholarship possible." Amina stood and extended her hand, her grip firm and confident. "I've been wanting to thank you for months. When everything came out, when they started investigating, my family thought I'd lose my chance at a quality education. Instead, I ended up here." Maya shook her hand, studying Amina's face. "What was it like, being there during the investigation?" "Chaotic," Amina admitted. "Half the faculty resigned, parents were pulling students out left and right, and the media was camped outside the gates for weeks. But it was also liberating. For the first time, students like me could speak up without fear." Dr. Foster gestured for them to sit. Amina has some interesting insights about what happened after you left, Maya. Things the media didn't cover. Amina pulled out her tablet and showed Maya a series of photograph students of all backgrounds working together on projects, study groups that crossed traditional social boundaries, clubs focused on community service rather than social status. The ironic thing is that Jefferson Academy's final semester was probably the best education anyone had received there in decades, Amina explained. Without the toxic hierarchy, without the constant threat of social warfare, people actually started learning together. Maya scrolled through the images, recognizing some faces: scholarship students who'd been invisible before, now leading student committees and academic initiatives. What happened to the others? The ones who used to run things? Brandon Whitmore transferred to a military academy in Virginia. His father thought discipline would help rebuild his character. Marcus Sterling surprised everyone. He stayed until the end, spent most of his time working with the Community Service Club, helping to organize the school closure transition. And Trevor? Amina's expression grew more complex. Trevor's been the biggest change. His family's pharmaceutical company got hit with a massive investigation after your story broke. Turns out they'd been bribing school officials across 3 states to suppress students who might compete with their kids for elite college spots. Trevor's in therapy now, dealing with the pressure his family put on him. Maya felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sympathy. These boys had tormented her and others, but they'd also been products of a system that valued winning over humanity, status over character. There's something else, Amina continued, her voice dropping lower. Something that didn't make the news reports. She pulled up a video on her tablet, grainy security footage from Jefferson Academy's main office. The timestamp showed it was from 3 days after Maya's confrontation with the boys. This is Headmaster Davidson's office, Amina explained. Watch what happens at the 2-minute mark. On screen, Maya could see Davidson pacing behind his desk, clearly agitated, while Dr. Hawthorne sat across from him. Their conversation was inaudible, but their body language spoke volumes: urgent gestures, heated exchanges, papers being shuffled frantically. They were destroying evidence, Amina said quietly. Financial records, disciplinary files, correspondence. With wealthy families. Katie's recordings forced them to stop, but they'd already eliminated years of documentation. Maya's stomach tightened. How do you know this? Because I was there. Work-study student, filing papers and emptying trash cans. Nobody notices the scholarship kids when they're doing menial labor. Amina's smile was sharp with irony. I started documenting everything after your story broke. Figured someone should preserve the truth. Dr. Foster leaned forward, her expression serious. Amina's documentation led to additional federal charges against Davidson and several board members. The FBI is calling it one of the most comprehensive cases of educational fraud they've ever prosecuted. Maya felt the weight of unintended consequences again. Her moment of self-defense had unraveled corruption that went back decades, affected hundreds of students, destroyed careers, and reshaped entire institutions. Sometimes she wondered if she'd opened Pandora's box. Do you ever regret it? Amina asked, as if reading her thoughts. Knowing how far it all spread, Maya considered the question carefully. Through the conference room windows, she could see MIT students collaborating on projects, their diversity a stark contrast to Jefferson Academy's homogeneous environment. Here, brilliance came in every color, every background, every economic circumstance. I regret that it took violence to get people's attention, Maya said finally. I regret that other students suffered while adults looked the other way. But stopping the cycle of harm? No, I don't regret that. Her phone buzzed with a text from Katie, who was now studying journalism at Columbia with a focus on investigative reporting. The message included a link to her latest article, 1 year later, How Student Activism is Reshaping Elite Education. Maya clicked the link and skimmed the article, which detailed similar movements at private schools across the country. Students organizing, documenting, demanding accountability from institutions that had operated in shadows for generations. "You started something," Amina observed, watching Maya read. "Schools are changing their policies, implementing oversight. Committees with student representation, creating anonymous reporting systems for harassment. It's not perfect, but it's progress." Dr. Foster stood up, checking her watch. "Speaking of progress, Maya, your robotics team is waiting in Lab 7. They're excited to hear your ideas for the community outreach project." As they gathered their materials, Amina hesitated. "There's one more thing. Marcus Sterling asked me to give you this if I ever met you." She handed Maya a sealed envelope, his familiar handwriting spelling out her name on the front. Maya opened it carefully, finding a single sheet of paper with a brief message. "Maya, I've been thinking about what you said about power and birthright. You were right that we were scared boys hiding behind threats. I'm trying to become something better now. The Sterling Foundation is funding self-defense programs at public schools across New York State. We're calling it the Thompson Initiative after your grandmother's maiden name that you mentioned in one of your interviews. I hope that's okay. I hope it helps." Marcus, Maya stared at the letter, feeling tears prick her eyes. Transformation was possible, even for people who seemed irredeemably lost. Even for boys who'd once thought intimidation was their birthright. "Good news?" Amina asked gently. "Hopeful news," Maya replied, folding the letter carefully. "The best kind." As they walked toward the robotics lab, Maya touched the jade pendant at her throat, now joined by a small silver charm shaped like the MIT beaver. Her grandmother's strength, her parents' sacrifices, her own hard-won victories, all carried forward into a future she was building one choice at a time. Behind them, Dr. Foster smiled, thinking about the recommendation letter she was writing for Maya's summer internship at NASA. Some students came to MIT to learn. Others came to change the world. Maya Rodriguez was definitely the latter. 2 years after the Jefferson Academy incident, Maya Rodriguez stood on the stage of the Lincoln Center in New York City, addressing an audience of over 3,000 educators, students, and activists. The annual Conference on Educational Equity had invited her as the keynote speaker, but as she looked out at the sea of faces, she felt the familiar flutter of nerves that always preceded moments of truth. "When I threw those boys through that window," Maya began, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium sound system, "I wasn't thinking about changing the world. I was thinking about surviving the next 5 minutes." A ripple of knowing laughter moved through the crowd. Maya had learned to lead with honesty, to acknowledge the messy reality behind the inspiring headlines. "But here's what I've learned in the 2 years since. Real change doesn't happen in moments of dramatic confrontation. It happens in the quiet choices we make every single day after the cameras stop rolling." In the front row, Maya spotted familiar faces. Katie Chun sat with her notebook open, now a junior reporter for the Washington Post whose investigative series on educational discrimination had just won a Pulitzer Prize. Beside her, Luis Rodriguez beamed with pride, his maintenance uniform replaced by the business suit he wore to his new job as Director of Facilities Equity for the New York City school system. But it was the figure in the third row that surprised Maya most. Marcus Sterling, now 20 years old and nearly unrecognizable from the entitled boy who'd once terrorized scholarship students, sat quietly taking notes. His transformation over the past 2 years had been remarkable: community college, volunteer work with at-risk youth, and a complete rejection of his family's wealth in favor of building something meaningful with his own hands. The statistics tell one story, Maya continued, clicking to her first slide. Since the Jefferson Academy investigation began, over 40 private schools nationwide have implemented comprehensive anti-bullying programs with student oversight committees. Federal funding for educational equity initiatives has increased by 30%. And most importantly, student reporting of harassment incidents has increased by 200%, not because harassment is increasing, but because students finally believe their voices matter. The audience applied, but Maya raised a hand for quiet. But statistics don't tell the whole story. They don't tell you about Alexandra Morrison, a freshman at Phillips Academy who used the anonymous reporting system to expose a hazing ring that had operated for decades. They don't tell you about James Liu, whose documentation of discriminatory grading practices led to the first successful federal civil rights lawsuit against a charter school network. Maya clicked to the next slide, showing photographs of young people from across the country, students who'd found their courage, who'd chosen to speak truth to power, who'd decided that their education was worth fighting for. They don't tell you about the Thompson Initiative, Maya said, gesturing toward Marcus in the audience. A program started by someone who was once part of the problem, but chose to become part of the solution. In just 18 months, the initiative has funded self-defense training for over 5,000 students in underserved communities. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly unused to public recognition, but Maya saw the small smile that crossed his face. And they don't tell you about the Rodriguez-Seen Educational Justice Fund, which has now provided full scholarships to 137 students who might otherwise never have had access to quality education. Maya paused, letting her gaze sweep across the auditorium. But here's what the statistics do tell us. Institutional change is possible. When students refuse to accept that's just how things are, when they document injustice instead of suffering in silence, when they choose solidarity over self-preservation, that's when real transformation begins. Her phone, sitting on the podium, buzzed with a notification. Maya glanced down and saw a message from Amina Hassan, now in her second year at MIT, and leading the development of AI systems designed to detect patterns of harassment in educational settings. The message was simple: watching the live stream. You're changing minds out there. Maya looked back up at the audience, feeling the weight of responsibility and opportunity in equal measure. I want to share something with you that I've never talked about publicly before. 6 months after the Jefferson Academy incident, I received a letter from Brandon Whitmore. A murmur ran through the crowd. Brandon's father's corruption trial had been front-page news for months, and Brandon himself had largely disappeared from public view. He was writing from a military academy in Virginia, where he was struggling to rebuild his understanding of leadership and power. The letter was 3 pages of apology, regret, and something I hadn't expected: gratitude. Maya pulled out her phone and read from the screen. Maya, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I want you to know that what you did saved me from becoming something irredeemably terrible. I was heading down a path that would have destroyed not just other people, but ultimately myself. You showed me that real strength means protecting others, not dominating them. The auditorium was completely silent now, everyone leaning forward to catch every word. Brandon finished his letter by telling me about a program he'd started at his new school, peer mediation training, that helps students resolve conflicts without violence or intimidation. He said he wanted to spend the rest of his life making amends for the harm he'd caused. Maya folded her phone and looked directly into the audience. I'm telling you this not because Brandon deserves praise, he doesn't, not yet, but because it illustrates something crucial. People can change. Systems can change. But only when we refuse to accept cruelty as inevitable. In the audience, she spotted Dr. Foster from MIT, who'd driven down from Boston specifically for this speech. Beside her sat Teresa Martinez, Jessica's mother, who'd become a leading advocate for parent involvement in educational oversight. The ripple effects continued to spread, 2 years later, touching lives in ways Maya was still discovering. I want to close with a challenge, Maya said, moving away from the podium to stand at the edge of the stage. Everyone in this room has witnessed injustice. Everyone here has seen someone with power abuse it, seen someone vulnerable being targeted, seen a system protect the wrong people. The question isn't whether you'll encounter these situations. You will. The question is what you'll do when you do. Maya touched the jade pendant at her throat, thinking of her grandmother's courage, her parents' sacrifices, and all the students who'd found their voices since that morning at Jefferson Academy. You might not know Judo. You might not have video evidence. You might not have all eyes ready to stand with you. But you have something more powerful than any of that. You have the choice to refuse to be silent. She looked out at the faces in front of her teachers who could create safer classrooms, administrators who could implement fairer policies, students who could support each other, parents who could demand accountability. The boys who grabbed my wrist that morning thought they had all the power. They had wealth, connections, institutional protection, and the weight of tradition on their side. But they didn't have the one thing that actually matters. They didn't have the courage to do what's right. Maya's voice rose, filling the auditorium with conviction. Change doesn't require a dramatic moment. It doesn't require throwing anyone through any windows. It requires the daily choice to stand up, speak out, and refuse to let cruelty masquerade as normalcy. The standing ovation began in the front row and swept backward through the auditorium like a wave. As the applause continued, Maya saw people throughout the crowd pulling out their phones, typing notes, making commitments to action. Later, as Maya signed books and spoke with attendees, Marcus Sterling approached her table. Up close, he looked older than his 20 years, marked by the hard work of genuine transformation. "Thank you," he said simply, "for including me in your story today, for showing people that redemption is possible." Maya studied his face, seeing sincerity where once there had been entitled arrogance. "Thank you for proving that people can change. That's a gift to everyone who's struggling to believe in second chances." As the evening wound down and the auditorium emptied, Maya found herself standing alone on the stage where she just addressed 3,000 people. Her phone showed dozens of new messages, speaking requests, interview offers, collaboration proposals. The work was far from over, but for a moment, she allowed herself to feel the satisfaction of a job well done. 2 years ago, she'd been a scared scholarship student fighting for survival. Tonight, she was a voice for change, a catalyst for transformation, a reminder that ordinary people could reshape the world through extraordinary courage. Maya Rodriguez had learned to throw more than just bullies through windows. She'd learned to throw open doors to justice, opportunity, and hope. And tomorrow, she'd wake up ready to do it all over again. As the last of the attendees filtered out of Lincoln Center, Maya gathered her materials and prepared to leave. But her evening wasn't over yet. Outside, a small group waited for her, not reporters or admirers, but the people who'd shaped her journey in ways both profound and unexpected. Jessica Martinez had flown in from Stanford, where she was completing her master's degree in educational psychology. Her research focused on the long-term psychological effects of institutional bullying, work that had already influenced policy changes at universities across California. Beside her stood David Kim, now a software engineer at Google, whose app, Safe Space, had become the leading platform for anonymous harassment reporting in schools nationwide. "Maya," Jessica called out as she emerged from the stage door. "That speech was incredible. When you talk about the daily choices, about refusing to let cruelty masquerade as normalcy, that's going to stick with people." David nodded enthusiastically. "I've already got 50 messages from educators wanting to implement Safe Space in their districts. Your words tonight are going to translate into real protection for thousands of students." But it was the figure standing slightly apart from the group that caught Maya's attention. Dr. Sarah Wellington, former Jefferson Academy faculty member and current professor of education at Teachers College, Columbia University. Dr. Wellington had been one of the few Jefferson teachers who tried to support scholarship students, often facing subtle retaliation from administrators for her efforts. "Dr. Wellington," Maya said, extending her hand. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." The older woman's smile was warm but tinged with regret. "I've been following your work closely, Maya. Your speech tonight reminded me why I became an educator. In the first place, not to maintain systems of exclusion, but to tear them down." Dr. Wellington pulled out a folder from her briefcase. "I wanted to give you something. Documentation from my time at Jefferson Academy, incident reports that were buried, meeting minutes that show the deliberate targeting of scholarship students, correspondence between administrators and wealthy families about maintaining standards." Maya's eyes widened as she flipped through the papers. Names, dates, patterns of discrimination going back over a decade. "Why didn't you release this before?" "Fear," Dr. Wellington admitted. "Fear of losing my job, my reputation, my ability to support my own family. But watching what you've accomplished, seeing the courage you've shown, it made me realize that my comfort was less important than these students' futures." Katie Chun appeared at Maya's shoulder, her journalist instincts immediately activated. "This is explosive material. We could trace these patterns back to dozens of families, showing systematic abuse spanning years." "That's exactly what I'm hoping for," Dr. Wellington said. "I'm retiring next year, and I want to spend my remaining time making amends for my silence. Consider this my contribution to the cause." As they stood on the sidewalk outside Lincoln Center, Maya felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders once again. Every revelation brought new opportunities for justice, but also new complexities, new people whose lives would be affected by the truth. "There's something else," Dr. Wellington continued. "Jefferson Academy's former campus, it's been purchased by a nonprofit organization. They're converting it into the Equity Education Institute, a training center for educators focused on dismantling discriminatory practices in elite schools." Maya's heart skipped. "Who's behind it?" "An anonymous donor," Dr. Wellington replied, with a knowing smile. "Though I suspect you might recognize the funding source when you see the curriculum they're developing." She handed Maya another document, a course outline for transformational leadership in educational settings. The methodology section credited the Rodriguez model of student advocacy, and the required reading list included Katie's investigative reporting, Jessica's psychological research, and David's technological innovations. "They want you to design the capstone program," Dr. Wellington said. "A 2-week intensive where current educators learn directly from the students whose lives they're meant to serve." Maya stared at the proposal, overwhelmed by the scope of what was being offered. This wasn't just recognition or honor, it was the chance to systematically change how teachers and administrators approached their work, to prevent future Jefferson Academies before they could cause harm. "Who would I be working with?" Maya asked. "A team that might surprise you," Dr. Wellington said. "The Institute's Youth Advisory Board includes former Jefferson Academy students from all backgrounds, scholarship recipients, and legacy admissions alike. They've been working together for months, developing approaches that acknowledge privilege while building genuine understanding." Maya looked around at her friends Jessica, David, Katie, all of whom had transformed their own trauma into tools for helping others. "What do you think?" "I think you already know the answer," Katie said. "You've never been able to walk away from an opportunity to create change." David pulled out his phone and showed Maya the Safe Space dashboard. "Look at this. Reports of harassment are up 300% in schools using our platform, but successful interventions are up 400%. When students believe they'll be heard, when they trust the system to protect them, they speak up. And when they speak up, things change." Jessica nodded. "My research shows that students who witness effective responses to bullying become advocates themselves. One intervention creates ripple effects that can transform entire school cultures." Maya felt her grandmother's jade pendant warm against her skin, as if Carmen Rodriguez were somehow present, lending her strength across the barriers of time and death. The scared girl who'd been cornered in Jefferson Academy's hallway seemed like a lifetime ago, replaced by someone who understood that power wasn't about domination, it was about empowerment. "Dr. Wellington," Maya said finally, "tell the Institute I'm interested, but I have conditions. Name them." "First, the program has to be free for educators from Title I schools. Second, we include a component on healing trauma both for educators who've been complicit in harmful systems and students who've been damaged by them. Third, we bring in voices from every kind of educational setting: public schools, charter schools, homeschool cooperatives, alternative programs. This can't just be about fixing elite institutions." Dr. Wellington smiled, pulling out her phone to take notes. "Anything else?" Maya looked at Marcus Sterling, who'd been quietly listening from the edge of the group. Over the past 2 years, his transformation had been remarkable, from entitled bully to thoughtful advocate, from someone who wielded privilege as a weapon to someone who dismantled it brick by brick. "One more thing," Maya said. "Marcus, I want you to co-design the program with me." Marcus's eyes widened in shock. "Maya, I'm not qualified. I don't have the credentials, the experience." "You have something more valuable," Maya interrupted. "You understand how privilege operates from the inside. You know how systems of exclusion feel natural and justified to the people who benefit from them. Students like Brandon, Trevor, the next generation of wealthy kids who might follow the same path. They need to hear from someone who walked away from that life and chose something better." The group fell silent, everyone understanding the significance of what Maya was proposing. It wasn't enough to tear down harmful systems. They needed to build new ones that included even former perpetrators in the work of transformation. Marcus wiped his eyes, clearly overwhelmed. "I don't deserve this opportunity." "Deserve has nothing to do with it," Maya said firmly. "This is about what works. This is about preventing other kids from making the choices you made, and helping others find the path to redemption that you've walked." As if on cue, Maya's phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced down to see a message from an unknown number. "Ms. Rodriguez, my name is Patricia Whitmore. I'm Brandon's mother. I know you have no reason to trust my family, but I've been working with a congressional committee investigating educational discrimination. Could we meet? I have information that could help." Maya showed the message to the group, watching their reactions range from skepticism to curiosity. Even Brandon's family was evolving, apparently, shaped by the consequences of their actions and the possibility of making amends. "It never ends, does it?" Jessica observed. "One conversation leads to another. One revelation opens up new possibilities." "That's the point," Maya said, pocketing her phone. "Change isn't a destination, it's a direction. Every day, we choose which way we're moving." As they began to walk toward the subway station, Maya felt the familiar sense of momentum that had driven her since that morning at Jefferson Academy. There were more schools to transform, more students to empower, more systems to challenge. The work was far from over, but tonight, surrounded by friends who'd become family, walking through a city full of possibilities, Maya Rodriguez felt the deep satisfaction of someone who'd found her purpose. She'd learned that the most powerful weapon against injustice wasn't physical strength or political connections or even viral videos. It was the relentless, daily choice to believe that things could be different, and the courage to act on that belief, one window breaking, door opening, world-changing moment at a time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.